Hello. So I hope you're all well and they're having a good weekend or a good day wherever you are in the world. And today I am looking forward to talking with you all about languages again, and of course about the questions and things that interest you about language learning. It's always good to be back to talk about languages, and of course it's our favourite topic. I've had a few questions. I wanted to sort of talk a little bit about a few things I've seen on social media that I found interesting. So one of the things I saw recently was about language learning levels. So somebody wrote on Twitter about, as polyglots, people that learn many languages, do you actually know languages well? And it's a fair question, because when you see people saying that they speak, I don't know, I would say probably anywhere over 8 languages, Christmas or something, I don't know. And the answer is this. So learning lots and lots of languages is something that you do because, everyone have different reasons. I can speak from my point of view. My reason is that I've studied languages to a high level where I've needed languages. So languages like French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, I studied at university. So I had to use them for lots of different reasons, for writing theses and things like that, writing academic pieces for work, for university. And I had to be able to talk about a range of different things. So you have to have quite a good level in the language to do that. And German is a language I've worked with, and also I studied later at university in Spain, and I had to have a high level in German to be able to do that too. But other languages I see as actually, for me, they are projects. So if I'm not using it for work or for my life, hello to everyone joining. Nice to see you all. If I'm using languages for my work or my life, like Macedonian is my home language, so of course my Macedonian is pretty good, I think, for somebody who uses it on a daily basis, and uses it in many different contexts. Of course, there are languages that I don't need to do that for, and when you learn language, you have this feeling of excitement and this thrill of learning, and I get the same feeling. I love starting to express all of the language in the same way and at the same depth as I do the first languages, or the languages that are sort of crucial for me to function. And the answer is no. So it would be a little bit silly for me to try to speak every language to the same level that I speak the languages that I use in very different ways. And the reason is because there are so many words in all of the languages. I mean, trying to name every single thing in every single language, when honestly, what's important is knowing for sort of basic communication, and to be able to use the language in a still a meaningful way, is knowing how the language works, knowing how to say things that you need to say, and knowing how to understand and ask questions to get the understanding that you need to keep the conversation moving on. Now, that doesn't actually require you to speak and know everything about the language. You can just simply learn enough to be able to do that. And so I am a great believer in learning language for the needs that you have. So if you work in a language and you work in a specific field, of course you need some vocabulary, and you need to be able to manipulate the language to be able to do that job. Or if you go and live in an environment or a context where that language is spoken, of course, you'll need to be able to do the things that you need to live in that language to be able to function properly. So that's important. If you study languages at university, if you do a degree like I've done, university courses, degrees and diplomas in languages, and if you do that, then you need to use language for those So for that reason, and for that reason, you do need to learn a lot of the vocabulary that say you wouldn't in other contexts. So this is kind of what I do now, is I now pick languages as projects that I study for a period of time, usually depending on the language, for a month, 3 months, or even a year, as I'm doing now in Korean. And I study them. But what I don't do is I don't beat myself up that I don't know all of the words that I know in another language and then say that I now no longer know that language at all because I don't know every single thing. For me, that's kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as we say in the English I grew up speaking. And that means that really there's a whole lot of good in what you've done with your study. So why is it that you then don't do anything just because you don't do everything that you do in the other languages, if you understand what I mean? And so this is kind of where I am at the moment. And also I don't have the time or the need or the ability then to retain that level of detail in every single new language that I come across. The other thing that's interesting, and sort of a reply to this I got as well, was, but can I read a newspaper in all of the languages? Well, actually, if I were to learn a new Romance language, a new Slavic language, or a new Germanic language, I would be able to read a newspaper. Actually, that would be one of the first things I'd be able to do. So if you were to give me a newspaper in Ukrainian, Belarusian, I would probably be able to read the newspaper very, very quickly and understand what's going on, what's happening. Whereas to be able to talk about sort of making something in the kitchen, reading a recipe, that would probably be a harder thing for me to do because there'd be way more day-to-day vocabulary that's very different. So that's kind of where I am with my things. So it's a very complex and convoluted thing. I often hear people say, oh yeah, talking about politics is a hard thing to do. Actually, if you speak a language already in a group, speaking about politics is a pretty simple thing for you to do because that type of vocabulary in related languages tends to be quite similar. The only types of languages, there are language groups where that's not the case, and that would be things like Hindi and Urdu, which is where the languages diverge. And you get to languages where they draw, Urdu would draw from Arabic and Hindi from Sanskrit more. When you get to more technical, more difficult vocabulary, they would tend to do that. But generally, as a rule of thumb, when you talk about Latin languages, Romance languages, Germanic languages, Slavic languages, and many other related languages, when you get to the more complex vocabulary, they actually tend to be more similar. When it gets to topics like economics, politics, religion, all those kinds of things that you think are very complicated actually tend to be the easier things to tackle when you're learning a language of the same family. And the hard things are the very basic things that people talk about. Some terms of expression, things that are, they're the more complicated things to learn. Just wanted to sort of start off to talk about that because I think that there's a lot of misconception as to what it means to be a polyglot, what it means to speak lots of languages, what it means to learn a language quickly or not. So you'll see people having conversations after a very short amount of time about quite etherical things that they'll talk about. Someone will speak Spanish, Italian, and French, and then they'll learn Catalan. It'll seem like they've learned Catalan in a few weeks, but you have to pay attention to what topic they're actually talking about. Are they talking about what the dog does? Because to learn the word for dog in Catalan is a very different word to learning the word for, I don't know, administration or political party, which would be more similar to the Spanish or the Italian, if that all makes sense. So that's kind of sort of a look into the world of a polyglot, and you find very often people will say they feel that it's difficult to gauge what your level is. So people will ask me very often, what's your level in this language? And it's very difficult because if I compare myself to somebody who's never seen language before and never learned a language similar, of course it will seem like my level is higher. But you can get to that kind of almost, it's almost like a cheat level, if you know what I mean, because you already have a lot of the words and vocabulary already, and often grammatical points as well, way further in advance as you would do if you were to learn a language from zero, completely with no idea of the language at all. There are good things and bad things about that, but that's just the way it is. I'll give you an example. So I was speaking to a Bulgarian speaker the other day. In fact, I have conversation hours once a week in Bulgarian, because I understand Bulgarian very well. I can watch TV in it. I can read a newspaper very easily. But there are things that you don't particularly know. And many Bulgarians will think that Macedonian is very, very similar. And of course, it is similar in the same way as Swedish and Norwegian are similar. And we got to this word, and they asked me about this person was asking me about Turkish words in Macedonian, and I came across the word nar. Nar is the word for pomegranate, and it's actually a Turkish word, and it means pomegranate in Macedonian, but it's used only here as kind of a secondary word. It's a secondary Turkish word. Usually, sort of there are two words for things: the Turkish word and a Slavic word that you will use. And nar is this Turkish word, and it's used very commonly in Bulgarian, but not as commonly in Macedonian. And I said, well, actually, we call that kalinka. And kalinka is a normal Macedonian word for a pomegranate. Now, kalinka, when I said that word, she went, oh, no, I'm not talking about the insect. And I'm like, well, that's not, it's not. For you, that's an insect, because kalinka is the word in Bulgarian for a ladybird or a ladybird. If you skip that level of detail in a little bit in a conversation, you can find out quite quickly. I use it in conversation very, very easily, just to be able to function in different jobs and different roles. And that's one of the skills that I've sort of picked up, and what questions I need to ask them and how I need to ask them. And these are the kinds of tools that I use in my daily job. So very long answer to the question, but I found a very interesting one, and I think that there's probably not so much on this kind of issue that people talk about, and so I wanted to kind of address it before I get into other questions that you may have. And I hope that you found my little my little detour on this live useful and interesting. So now let me have a look at the questions that you've been writing in. So thank you so much for coming in and writing questions. Consigli per riuscire a leggere cosa? Russo. Russo. Per leggere russo. Una cosa, per me benissimo, c'è un libro di una mia amica che si chiama Judith Meyer, ha scritto varie libri con yourself, e quindi c'è script hacking russo anche, ma io direi che una cosa che utilizza lei per aiutare con il processo di imparare un'altra lingua come il russo, con tutto un altro alfabeto, e va bene usare parole già conosciute. Per esempio, parole che sono uguali in ogni lingua, come America, parole come Coca-Cola, computer, delle parole così, perché così non è le parole sono già conosciute, quindi non è così difficile capire quello che c'è scritto. Ma se c'è tutta una parola diversa e anche nuova e anche non così conosciuta per te, il processo, secondo me, diventa più difficile. Imparare la lingua, imparare come scrivere in una maniera piuttosto naturale. Quindi io direi così è realmente quello che si deve usare per poter imparare velocemente. Va bene così, Francesco? Allora, let me have a look and see if I have any more nice questions. Thank you very much for all of your hellos, and I appreciate it. I was talking a lot at the beginning, and I hope that if you didn't hear me saying what I was saying about I hope that if some of you see this later, that you'll enjoy the first part that I talked about this question that I had. Language learning is yes, it's definitely it's a holistic thing. Absolutely. Learning it in your daily life, that's completely right. You need to include the language in what you do in your day-to-day routine. Absolutely agree with that. Yeah, it was nice to see the comments, actually seeing these comments agreeing with some of the things I was saying before about when you learn languages and when they're similar and what you find easy and hard. And every language is, it depends on so many things. You know, when people ask about what things are hard and what's easy to learn, it really depends on you, and it depends on what your motivation is to learn. It depends on which other languages you already know, and it depends on how much time you invest in it. There's so much that goes on. I look like a Viking. Oh, thank you. Don't know if that's a compliment or not, but well, interesting. Ok, sei grande, grazie. Allora, okay, because I see on YouTube there are some more questions here. Go. So sorry for taking a bit of time in the beginning to ask these questions. I hope it was still interesting, but I'll get to these questions now. Magst du gern Orgelmusik? Ja, Olga, also in einer Kirche oder so, ja. Also zu Hause vielleicht nicht, aber also eine Kirche, ja. Und wie du spielst zum Beispiel, das wäre total schön. Ich meine, ich würde es sehr gern wieder hören. Also du spielst so gut. um, Thank you for your questions, Olga. Yeah, I'm very happy to ask more. What are your favorite languages and why? So my favorite language is probably German, simply because I learned it with children when I was an au pair in Germany. And I think those memories are really quite, strong for me, that I have quite a strong emotional attachment to Germany and the German language because of that, because we used to play all sorts of games and go out and do really cool things. And yeah, I really enjoyed that time in my life where learning languages with kids is always fun. So yeah, and then obviously Macedonian for me is very special because it's my home language, and it's the language that's basically my primary language now at home. So yeah. Can Pimsleur, is Pimsleur good to use? So is it better than Michel Thomas? I actually prefer Michel Thomas to Pimsleur because Pimsleur tends to stick to one way of teaching. So it tends to, I think, in my experience of it is it's the same kinds of phrases over and over again, whereas Michel Thomas is different things slightly, depending on the language. And I think any course that tries to teach you the same language in exactly the same way, with no sort of divergence, it's possibly not always the best thing to do. I'm not saying it's not worth it, but it's definitely not always the best. There are exceptions though, and I know a friend of mine, Alexander Arguelles, he loved Linguaphone for this, because Linguaphone used to have exactly the same texts in all of the languages, and he thought it was one of the best things ever. He always loved Assimil. I think that was his favorite, but he really loved Linguaphone for that reason. He makes some extremely interesting videos, actually. He made some extremely interesting videos on YouTube about comparing and looking at different language courses, which I think many people have found useful over the years. So I recommend those. But for me personally, Michel Thomas trumps Pimsleur just because it's adapted to that language. Also, for a language that I'm studying now, it wouldn't work so well because Pimsleur uses back chaining a lot, where you start a sentence, but then you sort of split it up and divide it, and you pronounce the end and then the middle and the beginning, and you put it all together. Now, in a language like Korean, that wouldn't work very well because some of the consonants actually change sounds depending on what's coming after. So if you were to backchain it, you would end up with a very confused, strange way of doing it. Now, I haven't done the Pimsleur Korean course. I did do the Michel Thomas course, and I found it very natural, and I found that things stick in my head. So yeah, I would say Michel Thomas over Pimsleur. How many languages do you think one person is able to speak in an advanced Okay, an advanced level of fluency. Um, Difficult to know, Diego. Honestly, I don't know. Eh, I'll be honest and say that in terms of like really, really being super, super good at a language, like sort of, I'm going to go with kind of a native type level, right? I don't think I've ever met anyone who's done that in more than 8 or 10, if I'm honest. I don't think so. Like that kind of level, no. Um, I've met people who speak languages very well and speak a number of them very, very well. And yeah, but I don't think I don't think I've ever. I mean, I've read claims and heard claims large numbers of languages, and they think that they speak them to kind of a native level or even fluently or whatever. And whatever your idea of fluency is, I think most people do think that fluency is kind of yeah, this sort of being able to speak. Well, oh, thank you, Victor. That's very kind of you for giving me. What's this? Oh, CLP 1000. I don't know what that is in currency. I don't know what that is, but thank you. That's very kind of you. That's very kind. Thank you. I it's nice to see you too. And I don't know honestly what fluency possibly means, but if I were to say this kind of native level, which I think is what you kind of mean, you're talking about this really advanced sort of that kind of level. Yeah, about 8 or 10 is about the most I've ever seen or heard, should I say. Che era l'argomento della tua tesina in italiano presso l'università? Oh no, ho un po' di vergogna, no, no. Mi dirlo. No, in Italia perché c'era una... Io sono stato a Verona all'università e quindi c'era molto spesso in quell'epoca in Italia una storia sulla prostituzione in Italia e la prostituzione delle persone che sono venute da altri paesi. Quindi ho scritto su questo. Era un tema per me interessante perché era un tema che non so, attuale. Quindi sì, questa è la prostituzione in Italia. Ho scritto su questo. Okay. Hi, Simcott. I'm from California. Co by pro tebe najlepší v češtině, když jsi naučil tento jazyk na Karlově univerzitě v Praze? Protože mluvil jsem česky doma. Bydlel jsem si rok s českou rodinou, takže to bylo pro mě nejhezčí, protože vlastně to jsem používal pro život, takže to bylo pro mě normální, že takže na to asi. A že to pro mě i první slovenský jazyk, takže zajímavé taky. Hay algunas experiencias con el ladino. El judeo español. Sí, he hecho un proyecto de judeo español de ladino durante un mes y pico, porque quería ir a visitar algunos amigos en Estambul. Y me fui para asistir a unas presentaciones en el idioma. Así que me fui a la sinagoga de Estambul para hacer esto y me gustó mucho. Y también tenía interés porque había un museo aquí en Skopje, un museo nuevo sobre los judíos que vivían aquí antes de la Segunda Guerra Mundial. Y había también cosas escritas y también vídeos en ladino, porque era un idioma que se hablaba aquí antes. Y muy poca gente lo sabe. Y ahora no saben muchos de verdad aquí que hablaban latino. Y por eso también quería conectarme más a la historia de este país, de la gente que había antes. Y para mí era muy interesante. También había una película interesante que, a ver, no vas a saber cómo se llamaba en español. una película súper interesante. Hay varios idiomas que se hablan en la película. Hay el búlgaro, macedonés, serbo creo también, ladino, alemán, roma y ¿qué más? Y albanés también creo. Y turco. Como 7, 8 idiomas, a lo mejor. Pero eso era una cosa normal por aquí. Y sí que me gusta mucho. La experiencia sí que fue fenomenal para mí. Me gusta bastante. Olga sí que habla muchos idiomas, es verdad. Say hello to Brazil, we love you. Olá, Brasil, tudo bem? Como va? Tiago, tudo bem? uh, so, a ver, Diego, can you see? Where are your little cats? My cats are downstairs. They're asleep at the moment. We have 2 kittens that we got. Probably when was it? Start of October. And they're very cute and they're downstairs. And I take silly pictures of them and put them on Facebook and write silly things. It's one of my hobbies. Hi, Richard. Nice to see you. Greetings from Niš. Zdravo. Very close. Niš is very close to us. It's one of the first cities in Serbia across the border. Annyeonghaseyo. Annyeonghaseyo. Shana, speak Brazilian Portuguese, please. Sim, agora sim, não sei o que dizer. Então, eu posso falar, mas. Let's see. Do you teach any languages? What do you think of italki? So I've not taught languages for a while because I've been working full-time in other industries. And I think that actually now, were I to do it again, I would definitely do it as more of this idea of coaching and not sort of, I'd probably help to understand languages and take people through it as a coach, going through it, talking through, understanding things and helping with understanding and helping with things like that. But I've not done it for a long time, just because I've been working on other things. And what do I think of italki? I think italki is great. I use italki all the time. In fact, I've been having italki lessons all through this period of being indoors. And it's been a lot of fun. I had a test de costó aprender. Es difícil. Creo que el checo para mí era bastante difícil para aprender y hablar bien, porque era el primer idioma del grupo. Y siempre es así que con el primer idioma del grupo, siempre te cuesta más para aprenderlo bien, porque hay muchas palabras nuevas, hay una gramática nueva y tal y cual. Y para mí también con el español, me acuerdo que me costaba bastante con los verbos cuando era más pequeño. Cuando era joven en la escuela, estaba estudiando español y con todos los verbos y tal, porque es un poco más complicado que el francés en este aspecto. El francés yo hablaba desde hace siempre, siempre hablaba español, francés, pero con el español sí que costaba un poco más para aprender bien en los verbos. Pero cada nuevo idioma es así, un poco difícil. Pero el checo sí, que hablaba bien. Ya no hablo tan bien, pero hablaba bastante bien antes, porque estaba estudiando en la universidad ahí. Okay, danke Richard. Ich spiele wieder. Oh, okay. Ja, das kannst du ja gern machen. Vielen Dank, Olga. Sehr toll. Great work. Keep it up. Thank you very much. Have you studied? Okay, let me see. Any tips for a team you follow reviewing what you've studied before, like your Korean project? Also, and I was thinking about this actually because I could potentially write more about sort of what I do with reviewing languages. I think I'm a great believer in if you have a break in a language or you start a language again after you've had a break, whether it's because you got to the end of your project or you just, for whatever reason you stop studying, I'm a great believer in going back and revising what you'd already done. So yes, I do that quite a lot. I've been doing it this year as well. When I say this year, last year too, with Indonesian, because I studied Indonesian a few years ago. I went to Indonesia, I spent a month there, and I spoke Indonesian to basically kind of level, let's say A2-ish maybe. And then I went back to review it, and now I've been speaking it once a week just so that I don't lose it again, because I really like Indonesian, and it's a fun language to speak. And even though I'm not amazing at the language, I can get by in basic conversation in Indonesian, and I know enough to be able to ask things and to figure out what things are, which is a nice level to be at, even though it can be frustrating at times that I forget words and I can't remember things and I get things mixed up and confused. That kind of level where you can already express yourself at a basic sort of level is quite nice, because you can always add in language, which is great. So I've kind of got to that level in it, and yeah, it's probably one of my favorite levels actually in a language, is this. You can get by, and you can talk to people for hours, and you'll make lots of mistakes. It'll be very basic. It'll be almost like Tarzan, like name Richard, you Jane, or this kind of way of speaking. How Tarzan spoke typically in the films, but that doesn't matter to me. I think the important thing is the communication. So I really, really like getting to that level, and I've got a couple of languages where I've got to that level before and really enjoyed. I did it with Finnish, and I did it with Latvian on projects, and I really, really liked that. I got to that level where I could start communicating in the language, and I'm getting to that level now with Cornish and Gaelic, and first time I've really taken on that side of the Celtic language, and I'm really enjoying it, because with Gaelic, Cornish obviously is more similar to Welsh, so I could probably understand quite a bit more Cornish than I can Gaelic naturally. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. Doing Cristang as well. Cristang has been a lot of fun, and I can really start seeing now how the language is building. It's the fun part of it. Korean, I'm quite a way away from that still. It's going to take me a bit longer. Okay, American English with this guy. You're a big fan of Alexander Arguelles. Yeah, he's a really nice guy. Where's he headed? Yeah, he is. He works at Concordia Language Villages now in Minnesota. So it's in a place in Minnesota called Bemidji. And in fact, I was there last year. I went to stay with him, and we had a really nice week together, where I went and visited where he works, and I spent time with him and his family. And it's not the first time we've done that. We've met up a few times around the world. So I spent a week with him in Russia once when he was there. We've obviously been to the conference together, so we've spent time together in many countries, in fact. So he came to stay in Iceland, in Ljubljana, in where else? In Thessaloniki. He was in Fukuoka. And yeah, he was in a few of the conferences. But someone like Alexander Arguelles is particularly nice, because he's not really online so much. So the only time to have that real connection is when you see him in person. And and he's got so much to say as well. I mean, he's got so much cool experience. It's always a real pleasure for me. And yeah, I wish we had more of that. I love that, and that's one of the reasons why I started the Polyglot conference. The first language conference like that for multilinguals, people who like multiple languages. And yeah, is Luca Lampariello your friend? Yes, he is. I like Luca a lot too. And yeah, Luca and I, when was the last time I saw him? I'm trying to think now. I think it might have been in Bratislava, at the Polyglot gathering. And yeah, Luca and I get on very well. We've spent quite a few summers together, actually. So we've spent a few summers in Poland together, and stayed with me in my house when I lived in the UK. But yeah, I mean, things change, obviously. I mean, from when having a family and stuff means that, so it can be harder. Certain points in my life have changed, so I've not always been able to meet up with people as much as I wanted, and obviously this last year has been particularly difficult. But yeah, we do, and we meet up, and I really enjoy it. So yeah, Luca and I get on very well. And yeah, there are a number of people sort of that you see online. The only person I haven't met in spoken to properly in person is Moses, and I would love to. We've spoken on Skype. We spoke a few times years ago, but it's been a long time. I think probably he's been quite busy, but yeah, he's probably the only one that I haven't met. I've met many of the other people that you kind of see in the language community, and they all tend to be very nice people. This is the thing, is, you know, it's Steve Kaufman. I've always gotten very well with him when I meet up with him. Stu J as well. I've met with him. We met when I was in Thailand, and if you don't know, I have a family connection to Thailand. So I was in Thailand visiting family, and I met with him in Bangkok while I was there. I had a couple of nights layover in Bangkok, and we met there. And yeah, it's amazing actually that all of these people that you sort of you meet up with. Judith Meyer, for example. Judith Meyer and I have been very good friends for a long time. I've stayed at her place numerous times in Berlin, and with Chuck, her partner, and we've had wonderful times together. And I went to visit when she was in Greece, and we met up in Greece, and we've done some really fun things. So she's involved in the DM25. I've never actually said it out loud in English. So DM25, which is with the famous Greek politician Varoufakis, and so I actually went to Thessaloniki to support her, because she was kind of around in Thessaloniki, and I was very close by, and I went to the launch of that political party. It's a very interesting thing to do, actually, because I didn't realize that they launch parties in Thessaloniki in Greece as a typical thing to do. And that was, yeah, very, very nice. Sorry, I've gone off to a bit of a tangent because people are asking me about people I meet up with, nice times with these lovely people. What's my opinion on Duolingo, and do you speak Icelandic? So my opinion on Duolingo is that it does a good job in popularizing language study. That's my opinion on Duolingo. Beyond that, I have mixed experiences with it. I've met people who studied Duolingo and then they can't really follow very much, or they say to me they can't really do very much with the language after they've finished it. Then I've also met people who have done quite well with it and surprised me in terms of what they can do and how their ability to move on and learn other things. So a very mixed bag of people's abilities and thoughts on the process and thoughts on what they can do after they've done Duolingo. It depends very much on the language, I think, and it depends very much on the person learning with it. And if you substitute it and use it, you substitute things out with it as well, that you use other material, not just Duolingo. But I think what it's done to popularize language learning, I think that part I think is great, because the more people that learn languages out there, I think is a good thing. So I could never say that I don't like it. I don't use it personally. I find, personally, I feel frustrated with the very odd phrases and sentences that it asks me to learn. Just a very slow way of doing it. But that, just because it doesn't fit the way I learn language does not mean it's necessarily bad, because I have seen it work for other people. As soon as I've seen people who do this successfully, I can't say a bad thing. No, I think that's kind of where I am with it. And Icelandic, I studied Icelandic at university in Iceland. I did the summer course, and it's the kind of an intensive summer course that you do in Iceland. And I was put in high group because I'd already studied Icelandic before. Do I speak it? Yeah, I can get by in Icelandic. It's one of those languages I can get by in. When I go to Iceland, I use it. Speak is quite relative. Yeah, I speak it, I guess, but it's not amazing. My ability in it is not amazing. Do you know a lot about my ancestry, ethnicity, family tree? Does that impact your language learning? Nevi, good question. So for people who don't know, I'm English and Welsh. And all of my family is English and Welsh for as far back as we can go in the family tree. I have no other connections to other countries in terms of my ancestry. It's all from well, North Wales and Northwest England. And so yes, it's kind of, it made me want to learn Welsh because I'm very aware that my grandmother's parents spoke Welsh as a first, English as a second language, and they didn't pass that language on to a family because they thought it was a disadvantage. It was a time where Welsh was kind of put down, same way as many other countries, and learning it. If you belong to an indigenous group in any way like that, I think that it impacts everyone differently. So there's not one. You know, my brother, for example, isn't interested in languages or that side of anything at all, and is very happy just carrying on with English. But for me, it was very important for me as my identity as well to go back and learn Welsh. And so, yeah, it definitely has. And I'm very glad I did it. And the good thing is my grandmother got to see me speaking, or heard me speaking Welsh before she died, and she was actually quite proud that I did it because it meant something to her hearing me speaking the language of her parents. We always had Welsh words in our English, but yeah, it was a big thing for me. And the same thing also for my family tree. I mean, talking about my family tree now, speaking Macedonian for me was really important because really, I think someone's interested in other languages, and they just do it naturally, kind of since they are interested in other cultures. Absolutely, I think that they're more likely to be caring people. Yeah, American English with this guy, it possibly. I think that there's an empathy when you want to learn a language. Depends on, obviously everyone's got a different personality type and different reasons and motivations, but yeah, I mean, when you learn a new language, I would hope that that would be sort of one of the things behind it, is this empathic. You want to understand a different way of thinking, a different view of the world. And sort of what I would always say is, even the languages, people say that actually you see the world is the world and the expression is the expression, but I think what you do see is you see the world through a different historical lens, because the way history is recorded and reported in different countries is very different, and that impacts how news is related in those countries, because they report on the news from a very different history. It's amazing, for example, being from a place like the United Kingdom, many people sort of come across in the UK are not aware of the history with the history we have with India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh as it now is, and what that was before. There are many people who weren't taught that at school, and are completely oblivious to, you know, the last war, which was in the 70s, with what was then called, now Bangladesh, was East Pakistan and West Pakistan, and many people are not aware what went on in these places, or what went on in other parts of the world where the British Empire went and did its own thing. And it's incredible when you go and you meet other people from other countries, and you get to learn about things that you didn't understand in that way. When I first went to the Czech Republic, and how people learn about Czech history in Czech Republic, I studied Czech history and Czech culture, as well as the Czech language, and you know, how they viewed what happened after the Second World War and during the Second World War, how they viewed that, because we were only taught about sort of Poland and Belgium were the key countries that sort of that were triggers during the Second World War. That's what we were taught in the UK, but we didn't really hear very much or almost anything about the Czech Republic, and that was extremely interesting for me to sort of learn those different points of view, those different histories that sort of come together, and it makes you sort of see your own country in a different way as well, because you can't help but put all of the stories together. I mean, there's always at least two sides to every story, at least two, and often many, many more. Okay. Do you know of Shaman You My Sea or Oriental Pearl on YouTube? No, I don't, Craig. please do write to me and sort of introduce me to them. Unfortunately, on YouTube and on Instagram, the chat that's here now disappears for me, so I can't easily go back to them. But please do write to me and let me know, show me the channels. It would be nice to see. Es la película en ladino, a ver, novia que te vea. No, Luis, estamos hablando de la película de aquí, ¿no? Es una película macedonesa que se llama La liberación de Etiopía. Es que ya no me acuerdo bien, pero hace bastantes años que no lo he visto. Así que, are you going to do something online like you did last year? Chanel, very good question. So the sort of the global conference will happen anyway. So we're going to have a global conference anyway, which will take place via the website. That will happen. Whatever happens, that will happen. Whether we have it there or not, that's just going to happen every year now, I think. So that's the first thing. Cholula, in terms of what we have and have it and how big it can be, I think if at all will depend on the situation. It depends on what happens locally. We're keeping an eye on the situation and we'll just keep having to review. I'm not your dad, so you don't answer my child question. Happiness is health for your babies. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mario. I teach middle school in USA. We just talked about the way you spoke this last week. We are exploring Bangladesh and, of course, Myanmar after what's gone on. That's really good that you're doing that. I think it's really important to look at history from different sides. And that, I think, with language learning and with traveling and meeting and talking to different people really becomes very clear. I'm studying Spanish and I am a native English speaker. What do you think about using monolingual dictionaries versus bilingual dictionaries? Does it matter? We were encouraged to use both at university. So the reason a monolingual dictionary can be good is that it explains the word in the terms of the language. Whereas if you get a translation, of the word, often that translation is flavored and colored with what it means to you in your language, especially when you get to sort of these sort of more etherical terms that are not sort of, I don't know, let me think of a word. Maybe, okay, here's a wallet. So a wallet is a wallet is a wallet is a wallet. And whether it's a wallet in English or wallet in Spanish or wallet in whatever language, it's a wallet. So, you keep your money in it, you keep your cards in it, and that's basically it. But when you talk about terminology that can have slightly different meanings, then knowing how it fits into the language is important. So, yeah, and sometimes the sort of the etymology actually influences a slight difference in meaning from one language to another. So having it explained through the language can be really useful in that way. And let me give you an example, okay? Okay, so this is an example we had at university when I was doing translation studies for French. So in French, there's a word abominable. Abominable in French, in English, is translated as abominable. Now, if you have a text in French and you use whatever is abominable, if you translate that into English and say it's abominable, especially for a British English audience, you cannot use that word because even though it means the same thing, it is abominable. It's sort of English speakers and maybe even American English speakers, you think of a snowman. And the reason you think of a snowman because there was a character, the abominable snowman, and you almost can't take that word seriously in English. It's not a very serious word you can use. So in French, it doesn't have that at all. It doesn't, no one thinks of us a bonhomme de neige. En français, si on dit abominable. Ça se pense pas, ça se dit pas, donc il n'y a pas de problème. Abominable, ça va. It's not a nice word, but it's not connected to to this thing, whereas in English it definitely is. And abominable is not a word that you can use without people quite often like sort of smiling or laughing, and it's not the word that you should really be laughing at because it's quite a serious word. So sometimes in dictionaries it will give you examples, in monolingual dictionaries it will give you this kind of extra context and extra meaning that you don't get in just a translation. Yeah. So I hope that helps. ¿Qué es mi trabajo? Pues yo soy consultante de idiomas y doy consejos sobre cómo utilizar idiomas en proyectos internacionales y también trabajo con idiomas, así que en varios idiomas, pero con idiomas también, con equipos que tienen que trabajar en varios idiomas para clientes. Ok, ¿dónde sería tu primer viaje después de la pandemia? Pues muy buena pregunta. Creo que Reino Unido, porque me gustaría ver, visitar a mi papi en el Reino Unido. Me gustaría ir ahí. Mi mamá vive ahí, así que me gustaría ir. Y así que sí, ahí tengo familia en el Reino Unido. Pero a lo mejor Grecia también, porque está muy cerca y me gustaría ir a la playa, porque no tengo una playa por aquí. Bulgaria también, pero Bulgaria sí que puedo ir ahora, así que eso no es un viaje así, pero el Reino Unido sí que me gustaría visitar mi familia y mis amigos. A ver, sí. Mi hija piensa crear su propio canal YouTube. Mm, no lo sé, no lo creo. Ahora mismo no, porque no tiene edad, tiene 13 años, así que ah, hace falta esperar un poco más. Creo que con 16 se puede en YouTube. Ah, pero no creo. Y con idiomas no creo que lo haga. Today and my brain hurt. Yeah, I know that feeling. So I actually worked in many languages for many years, and I had to switch usually between 8 languages on a daily basis for my job. So the common languages that I had to use for work were a lot of the languages that I use here on these calls usually. So English, German, French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Swedish, Dutch, and then did I mention English? No, 8 languages. Anyway, something like that. They were the most common languages that I would have to speak, and then sometimes I'd need to use Danish or I need to use some other language as well. So they were the most common languages that I used for work for many years, and so I'm used to the phone ringing and it's saying the name of the country on the display, and I'd have to answer and answer questions about technical things or whatever they needed, or it depended on the client and who was calling. But I would have to do that in many languages and then write emails or whatever, follow up in the different languages. So that's the first thing that helped. And using them all the time for work and for pleasure and for home and all that. We mix languages a lot doing that. So it's practice really more than anything else. But I do remember a time where I lived in Czech Republic and I'd cross Charles Bridge on a daily basis, and I had to time it when there were very few tourists on the bridge, because my brain automatically goes from language to language, and I would cross the bridge and the bridge is full of tourists in summer particularly, and my ear would tune into every single conversation going across the bridge, and I would have a headache by the time I reached the other side, because I can't shut out the other languages. So it's almost like you've got all these voices speaking to you in your head, and you're listening to every conversation, and it's kind of taxing to do that, to go from one to the other, and having no control over it. It was a little bit crazy. In fact, as a result, I decided to move to the other side of the bridge, because after doing it for a few months, I was exhausted, and every day I would start the day, I was like, oh, I need to just sit down in a quiet room. Now I'm more used to it. And yeah, I mean, the most languages I've used in a day for work, I mean, socially is a different thing, but for work is 14 is the most I've used. And that was at an international conference that I was working on in Edinburgh. And that was a lot of fun. Are you gonna try and get to speak to Moses to come to a conference? You all need to put pressure on him. I don't know. I've asked nicely. Every year I invite Moses to talk and to be part of the conference. I would love for him to be part of the conference. He's always welcome, and I would love for him to come. When we were in New York, I reached out to him, and he said he couldn't make it, and that's as close as we've been to him. And yeah, unfortunately, he's not been able to make it. I mean, I have to be respectful. He's got his own private life, and he's got his gym work, and he's done his own things. But yeah, every year he's welcome. So yeah, please do, if you ever any of you have contact with Moses and you reach out, please do encourage him, because he would be extremely welcome at the conference, and he'd be a really, really nice person to have, because he's super inspiring to so many people. So I would love to see him. Is learning Korean noticeably changing my brain? I don't think I've got to that level yet. At the moment, the things that I'm learning in Korean kind of map out quite well onto the Japanese that I've studied before. So the kind of this article idea, and using these particles to sort of express an object or a subject, but then you don't use them so much in spoken Korean, which is strange, because you learn them and then you don't. Yeah, at the moment, not really, because it's similar to the Japanese. But I think as I move forward, hopefully I will start noticing more of a change. Unfortunately, I'm getting to the end of my time that I'm allowed on Instagram. It's been so nice to see you all. Thank you for coming, and thank you for your lovely questions. If I didn't get to your question, then please do join me again next week, and I will do my best to get through all the questions again. And I saw a question there. Have I been reading through questions? Yes, I had so many questions this time on Instagram and on YouTube that I've been going through them all. I've missed maybe about 5 or 6 questions, I'm sure, but hopefully I won't miss them next time, and I'll get through them all. But thank you all so much for joining me, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.